Hey guys, Luke here. Just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully you get some good food tomorrow and some nice time off, and an opportunity to be with friends and family. So um, I take taking a while, but I'm getting to the question regarding. So I kind of had to kind of sort through it, but basically, it sounds like people are coming off a recovery plan where you're basically taking the 2 weeks off and then gradually just running some short, easy runs. And then you have a few weeks, and then you're going to jump into um, training for uh, marathon. So starting, a lot of people are saying like December 23rd starts your training. So how do you bridge that gap between being, coming off recovery and then starting your actual schedule? So where you're at, I mean, you're coming off of a race, and regardless of how that race went, you trained really hard, and you probably had some muscle damage from the race, and you just needed time to kind of just let everything settle. So, given that, you obviously want to ease into it, which is why you asked the question. But you also have to, on the flip side of that, you're not going to be in as bad a shape as you think you are. So even with 2 weeks off, you might, say you're at 100% the day of the race, taking 2 weeks off after the race, you're still going to be like 85, 90% of your peak fitness level. You don't, it feel, I mean, 10% is a lot because it feels like you've taken years off, but it's not like you've regressed all the way back to, where you were, several months ago by any stretch of the imagination. It would take, a couple months of not doing anything to get to that point. And so you just have to keep that in mind too. So it's actually going to come back quicker than you think. And then people are going to want to say, "Oh, the 10% rule. I have to follow the 10% rule." There's a lot of issues with that. So I actually have a blog post on that on my site. So I would go to my site and research 10% rule, and we kind of talk about how fast you really can jump up. So if you've trained before, right? You're listening to this in a specific question for you was that, you're trying to bridge a gap from one segment to another. And so you've trained, you're beyond, even if you were brand new to running when you started your previous schedule, you're not a brand new runner right now from that standpoint. So you're not starting from scratch. So you can bounce back faster than 10%. Because if you start out at 10 miles a week and you go, okay, I'm going to go 10%, that's 1 mile a week. So you're going to be 11. So it would take you, you know, basically another 6, 8 weeks just to go from 10 to 20 miles a week. That's overkill, right? So you can be a little bit more aggressive. So I would say your biggest thing is just focus on duration first. So if you're at, say you're coming off recovery plan, you're at 10, 15 miles a week. The next week you could probably be 20. The next week you could probably be 25, 30. 3 weeks to go from 10 to 15 to 30 is not a big deal. But I would say focus only on duration first. And I wouldn't really focus on any long runs. I would just say if I'm running, 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, get that up to 40 to 45 minutes a day for 5 days a week. Don't add another day in. If you're doing it like 2 or 3 days a week and you're at 30 minutes, I would say add a fourth and then a fifth day at 30 minutes and then increase the duration from there. That's how I would approach it. I wouldn't really worry about any speed at all, anything like that. Anything of an intensity is going to add another stress. So we want to control the stress. So we're going to control it by adding either time and type, not type. It'd be volume. It's going to be volume, but it's going to be based on either adding time in days or both of those things, right? So it's not going to be adding intensity to that as well. That's when people get hurt. And I know it's an old cliche, but when you add more than a couple variables, you're ultimately increasing the risk of getting hurt by a significant amount. And so if we're gonna increase the volume simply by adding duration and number of days. So you don't need to be much more above 5 days a week right now. Just focus on getting the volume in there, and then once your schedule starts, then you'll be adding the intensity into it, and you're going to be at a point where you're going to be able to start really any type of schedule where you're at. So that's how I would approach that. If you're already running like 20, 30 miles a week, if you want to add some like marathon pace stuff and some long run stuff, I would do that, keeping the same guidelines. Like, don't, if you're running 30 miles a week, don't do more than a 10-mile long run, or, something like that. And then marathon pace, I would keep it really simple on the marathon pace stuff. Keep it almost like intervals. Like, a lot of times what I'll schedule people is 6 times 800 at marathon pace, or 8 times 800 at marathon pace, maybe Ks at marathon pace up to miles. And that's really about it where we start at, depending on the person. But it's not necessarily the workout that I'm worried about. It's just more about getting you back into the routine of doing workouts. And so that's the first point. So if we can make it kind of a softball workout for you, it's still going to feel difficult because you haven't done anything fast in a while. But it's not going to be, I'm not going to throw you into, 400s at 5K pace right away. So we want to kind of control that intensity variable, because from my standpoint, that's what people get hurt. That's where people get hurt the most, is when they add intensity. The volume and stuff, as long as they're keeping it easy, a lot of times that's okay. You're going to be sore, but really when people get hurt is when they just jump right back into really intense stuff. And that's when things start going wrong for people. So that's how I would do it. So pretty general, use your body as a guide, but basically you can go from 10, 15 miles up to 30 miles a week pretty comfortably within 3 weeks. So that's kind of what I would use for my guideline, and use the idea of just adding volume through adding another day if I want, or adding volume to the 5 days a week that I'm already running, and keeping those intensities light, because you're still in a process of letting everything recover, but you're not at kind of an acute stage where things immediately have to heal or it's going to create an injury, right? You're kind of in that remodeling stage, and things are starting to get better, but you're still kind of stiff and sore, and letting that it's kind of, now you're at a point where movement is actually medicine, where it's actually going to help you recover, and it's going to help you feel better. It's going to get you back into the routine of doing those things. So hopefully that helps you. I know it's not an exact science, but really kind of use how you feel. But the big thing I want you to take away is you don't have to take forever to go from 15 to 30 miles a week. You could do that in a couple, 3 weeks pretty comfortably. Just keep that intensity to kind of out of the equation for now. And then once you actually start your schedule, you'll be given the intensity back. And that's really the last variable you want to add back into a program. So hopefully that helps everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving. I'll talk to you later. All right. Bye-bye.